That is an honest to gosh pen and ink likeness of me, Malcolm Tent, and Mad Brother Ward on the front of a cassette insert. Sonic Sauna. What could that possibly be? Well, allow me, Malcolm Tent, to tell you what this is. That will simply be part of tonight's entertainment, tonight's infotainment on Tent Talks Tunes. Yes. If you hear this voice and you see this visage and you're live on Facebook, you can be pretty sure that it's Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, in this very continuum, this universe that we all dwell in, and I'm bringing it to you live. Of course, it might also be later. You could be tuned in to the archived version on my Facebook page. You might also be on my YouTube channel, which is where I archive every episode of Tent Talks Tunes, plus the Malcolm Tent Shoot interview series and the TPOS concert series and all the things that I just love to do here in the new normal with all of you, my frantic fans, loyal listeners, and vibratory viewers, including Genevieve Michaud from the Washington, D.C. area. Hi, thanks for tuning in. Woohoo! Yeah, so what is it? What is this thing, man? Well, it could be kind of self-explanatory, but maybe not. The Malcolm Tent Power Duo featuring Mad Brother Ward. One of my many musical side projects is the Malcolm Tent Power Duo. It's where I and somebody else tune up and basically make a lot of noise. It's like one of my noise projects. Although the first thing I did was the Malcolm Tent Power Duo featuring David Kendrick. Hand-lathe 7-inch record. David Kendrick, drummer of Devo, yeah. Drummer of Sparks, yeah. Bates Motel, Gleaming Spires, Empire of Fun, yeah. Me and one of the most explosive drummers ever making a record together? Whoa. So this is the follow-up to it. This was recorded during some downtime when I was in Charlotte, North Carolina for the most recent Antiseen broadcast, which can be found on the Antiseen official Facebook page. We had some downtime, so I put on my bass, he put on his guitar, and we made lots of feedback and lots of noise, and I took those recordings and brought them home and sculpted them and harmonized them and layered them and chopped them and sliced them and diced them and created a 60-minute cassette of soundscapes. Me and Mad Brother Ward from the almighty Antiseen. It's pretty dang good. If anybody wants one, let me know. I haven't listed it yet. It's not listed yet on my Discogs or my eBay, but I'm getting ready to have it available to the public. So if you're a mark for noise and sonic soundscapes, and or me, and or Mad Brother Ward, and or Antiseen, I got the cassette for you. All right. That was the advertisement part of our broadcast. I will drink to that. I will drink to the end of advertisements. Now let's see. I'm looking at this and I see a big old error message that says that my Dell has stopped working and I need to close the program. What the hell does that mean? I might end up disconnecting this right now. I hope not. Let's find out. All right, more technical difficulties and travails. So, as seems to happen every once in a while, I'm going to pause for a second and ask all you guys to chime in and let me know if I'm still live or not, because my computer just sent me a message saying that it has stopped working. So I closed something, and I don't know if I'm going out live or not. So somebody just give me a wave or a thumbs up, or I'm sure they've got an emoji for the bird, a like, a dislike, wave a flag, something to let me know that you all are there. And if I don't see any feedback, I'm going to assume that that you're not there. All right, okay. Is it Stephen or Stephen Smith from Poughkeepsie? Don't know how to pronounce it, but Mr. Smith says I'm here, which means I'm here. All right, cool. Thank you. That's all I needed to know. If you can see me in Poughkeepsie, you can see me anywhere. So yeah, this week's episode of Tent Talks Tunes is just random stuff, you know, just totally random. Hey, Jilski. Hello, Larry. All right, you guys are here. This is cool. I will continue rambling. I'm going to be like Led Zeppelin, baby. I'm going to ramble on. It's so good to be able to do that. So yeah, I just got a bunch of random stuff. You know, I devoted the last 3 weeks of Tent Talks Tunes to the unintentionally sprawling Broken Talent tour diaries. And if you missed that, once again, go to my YouTube channel. They're all archived. So I'm just going to talk about what I usually talk about is records and music and stuff. And I just had all kinds of random listening for the past few weeks. And as I'm prone to do, as I listen to these records and tapes and CDs, I join dots. I put puzzle pieces together. I think of how one thing leads to another and how things interrelate and how it's kind of interesting to talk about that stuff. The first thing I'm going to talk about is an artist who I never really appreciated until fairly recently. A few years back, a friend of mine, a dude named Justin Martell, wrote a book called Eternal Troubadour, which is all about Tiny Tim. And I had the dude on my radio program because I've always been kind of interested in Tiny Tim, you know, more just as a curiosity thing. But after having this guy on my show and having him talk about the book and talk about the life of Tiny Tim, I got really interested. So I bought a copy of the book, read it. The book's about this thick. It's an exhaustive biography of Tiny Tim. By the time I was like maybe 100 pages into it, even sooner, I was utterly hooked on the concept of Tiny Tim. Became a huge fan. I still didn't quite get him, but the thing that I got about Tiny Tim was he was absolutely legit. That the dude was not a put on. He was not a satirist. He was not a comedian per se. He wasn't doing, I don't know what else to describe it. He wasn't a put on. You know, when he did Rod Stewart's "Do You Think I'm Sexy" in his Tiny Tim voice, he wasn't kidding. Tiny Tim is an actual stylist. Like, and the only style of music that he loved was that turn of the 19th century into the early 20th century, kind of like vaudeville stage music as sung by crooners and, you know, vaudeville performers who had to really project their voices in order to sing to the last row of a really unruly audience in a vaudeville house, you know. And that's the only kind of music Tiny Tim ever liked, and it was the only kind of music that Tiny Tim ever wanted to perform. So his first and only hit, "Tiptoe Through the Tulips," was a song from that era, and he was singing it in a totally authentic style that suited him. It was the only way he wanted to sing, and it was the only kind of song he wanted to sing. Of course, people took it as being like a novelty or a comedy song or a joke, and it sort of led to a career for him, you know. But he would go out there and be like literally pouring his guts out, singing this music that he loved and singing these songs that he loved, and people were basically laughing at him, you know. But there, as is so often the case, there were a number of people who were able to see through the like superficial joke aspects of it and appreciate the artistry behind what he was doing. And by reading Justin Bartell's book, I finally started to get it. And so, luckily, since Tiny Tim's kind of regarded as a joke, I've been able to do some shopping online, of course, these days. I'm picking up these Tiny Tim albums cheap. This one is Girl, which he did with the Brave Combo. Just got this one in the mail today, I Love Me, which has some Negativland connections. And it's just him doing Beatles songs and old Tin Pan Alley songs. Yes, he does Stairway to Heaven on one of these things, but it's done in an interpretive fashion. It's Tiny Tim doing Stairway to Heaven in the only way that he knows how to do music. And it can be a tough listen because the style is so idiosyncratic and so specific to a certain era and time and circumstance that it's definitely kind of hard to get through an entire album. But I can take Tiny Tim about 5 or 6 songs at a time, and it's great. And just knowing that it's completely sincere and utterly for real is what makes it a good listening experience. So I've been very fortunate enough to release one Tiny Tim record on my label, TPOS, on Discogs and eBay. Just thought I would mention that again. And I'm actually talking to a dude who released Tiny Tim's, what Tiny Tim always thought was his best album, was his album called Prisoner of Love, a tribute to Russ Columbo. And Russ Columbo was, for a long time, the heir apparent to guys like Bing Crosby and Rudy Vallee. The dude was killed in an absolute freak accident, which you can research and find out about. But Tiny Tim's favorite album was all of Russ Columbo's songs, and I know the guy who released it, and we're talking right now. Hopefully soon on TPOS, there will be a vinyl issue of that Tiny Tim album. I cannot wait. I hope it happens. Mark Robinson, if you're out there, return my call. Let's get this done, man. Please. Tiny Tim. Love Tiny Tim. A toast to Tiny Tim. TTT. Tiny Tim, of course, doesn't relate to anything that I'm going to talk about now. I told you it was random. This is totally random. When the mean old landlord deprived me of my brick and mortar record store back in 2007, we had, a giant blowout sale, a huge liquidation sale. We had to get rid of a lot of stuff, but there was, of course, still much left over. We had, anybody who had ever been to Trash American Style when we were on Mill Plain Road in Danbury can tell you that we were dense packed with records, with tapes, with CDs, with clothes, with piercing jewelry, with books, with just anything that we thought was cool. We had a gosh dang ton or two of. So even with the giant liquidation sales, I ended up with a lot of records that were left unsold. I mean, a lot. And really not a whole lot to do with them. Because a lot of the stuff that was left over was from our cheap bin, And as you've heard on Tent Talks Tunes, the cheap bin was always my domain. I got some of the best music I've ever discovered by prowling the cheap bins, the great cutout bins of the department stores in South Florida in the 70s. Jefferson's, J.C. Penney, Specs Music, Sears, going for the remainders that nobody else wanted. And so all of a sudden, after being screwed out of my retail store, I had my own giant stash of the equivalent thereof, records that nobody bought, even though they were really cheap. So, with kind of dim prospects for ever selling them, I just went through them and picked aside records that I thought might be good to listen to, things that just looked cool, looked interesting, that I never had time to check out while I was running the store. And I probably picked 1,000 albums, because what else was I going to do with them? They weren't going anywhere. Might as well listen to them and check them out. And sure enough, I found some darn good music that way. And even though the landlord gave us the big shaft 13, coming up on 14 years ago, holy smoke. On May 1st, it's going to be 14 years. Think about that. 14 years without a brick and mortar Trash American Style. Practically a lifetime. So we're 14 years after the event, and I'm still going through those records. I listen to them, and if I find something I like, I keep it. If I find something I don't like, I list it on Discogs. And just the other day, I pulled out a record from that stash. I tried to get $3.50 for this record for many years, and nobody ever bought it. But I'm a sucker for the double live album. As you probably heard me talk about before, my entree into rock and roll at the tender age of 7, that's 7 years old, was when my Uncle Tom, aka Wally Weeds from the U.S. Army, bought me the epical, life-changing, world-shattering, double live album, Grand Funk Live Album. And I've already devoted a lot of time to this album, so I'm not going to get into it in depth, but it established in my mind that the double live album was like the ideal entry point for a band. Right? Kind of makes sense. And that was reinforced a little bit by another live album that I came across a few years later. And I'm going to take 1 second here and scroll down. Look at that Grand Funk cover while I scroll down and see what everybody's got to say. And everybody is tuned in. Okay, great. Excellent. Yes. The other double live album that provided an entry point to me was one that everybody I'm sure knows. This one right here. Kiss Alive, which I bought at Specs Music in 1975 or whatever when it first came out, and it served me very well. By the way, just in case y'all are wondering, if you're really Kiss fans, you might wonder, why does the Kiss logo look like that on the front? And why does the Kiss logo look like that on the iconic back cover picture? Why is the Kiss logo so cheesy and stylized? And why is it that when you open up the cover, it looks like that on the inside too? Why is that? This is the German pressing. This is the original first German pressing from 1975. At the time, when it was still East Germany, West Germany, the Kiss lightning bolt logo was outlawed because it bore too close of a resemblance to the SS logo from the Nazis in World War II. And the SS logo was strictly verboten. So when Kiss came out and their albums were being released in Germany, they had to come up with an alternate logo, which they did later. But this was the first attempt at it. It was just something that the record company slapped together so they could sell a Kiss record without being prosecuted for Nazi war crimes. I can't make this stuff up. So this is not the version of Kiss that I bought at Specs Music. This is, you know, the rare collectible German version, because that's like every record I have is the rare, ridiculous version. I really don't have any common records. I just have the most ridiculous left field collector's version of any record ever released. My version of Kiss Alive that I listen to is this one. That's just me, kids. It's the way I roll. Sorry. So double live albums, man. So I would just check out the double live albums any chance I possibly could. Still do to this day. Mind you, there were a lot of crappy double live albums. Lots of them. You know, when the record companies, especially around 1977 or so, in the wake of Kiss Alive, when they saw how many records Kiss sold with a double live album, they, of course, in their typical greedy, short-sighted, anything for a buck as quickly as we possibly can, in that major label corporate way of thinking, they were like, oh, well, who have we got on the roster? Who can we do a double live album by? Jethro Tull, okay. Wayne Harley and Cockney Rebel, you got it, double live album. Graham Parker and the Rumor, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. Double live album. We're going to break Wayne Harley and Cockney Rebel with a double live album. Yeah. We're going to show people the awesome power of Jethro Tull live with a double album. I bought all of these records when I was a kid. They all sucked. Oh my God, Jethro Tull on a double live album is every bit as boring and snoozy as Jethro Tull on a studio album. I paid $3.99 for it at Jefferson's and I felt ripped off. $3.99 ill spent, and that was in like $1979, man. That was like spending $30 for a record just to find out that it's a snooze fest. Graham Parker and the Rumor, sorry, that double live album did not make it. It wasn't even a double album. It was 3 sides of live music plus one song on side 4, like a one-sided disco 12-inch. They couldn't even fill up a double live album, but they tried. So you got 3 live sides and 1 disco 12-inch song. Corporate thinking at its best. So, 1977, I mean, and of course were success stories. Obviously, Frampton Comes Alive, right? You can't go to a thrift shop without finding a couple of those. Bob Seger Live Bullet. Yeah, they did break some bands with double live albums. Others they did not in the golden year of 1977. Did I say golden? How about Golden Earring? There's their double live album, baby. Golden Earring live. You can see it's a cutout, a telltale cutout. It did not sell, so they nipped off the end and dumped it into the cutout bins. And if the focus is really good, you can see that at my store, Trash American Style, I don't know if that's really going to show up. I tried to get $3.50 for this record. There it is. That's Chris Prorock's handwriting. $3.50 I tried to get it in the year 1997. And that thing sat there until the day I closed in 2007. 10 years this thing languished in the bins for $3.50. Well, we got to do something with it, so I took it home. And 14 years after taking it home, I put it on the turntable. It's good. It's real good. It's a really good album, man. I was very surprised by it. This is going to make me check out more Golden Earring. It's great. They're Dutch. They started out as the Golden Earrings in the 60s. I haven't heard any of that stuff, but now I really want to hear it. Of course, Radar Love. We all know Radar Love. But man, they were a tight, rockin' Dutch combo. They really got the job done. I like this record quite a bit. And it's a good, honest live album. There's no, from my ear, and it's hard to fool my ear, I don't detect any fake overdubs. I don't detect any fake live audience noises. No sweetening. There are bum notes on this record. You can, especially in the vocal department. The guy's a really good singer, but he's singing naturally and singing live. So he fluffs a note here and there, and they're on the record. I love that kind of stuff. The audience is way back in the background where they should be if you're recording a professional live album. So Golden Earring, man, all these years later, after it's sitting in my possession for 24 years, basically, with nobody paying any attention to it, has now found a home in the personal collection of Malcolm Tent. And I will listen to this, and I will love it, and I will cherish it forever and ever and ever and ever. And all it cost me, if I sold it for $3.50, I probably paid $1.75 for it. So $1.75 investment after 24 years pays off. Thank you, Golden Earring, and thank you for all the many, 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 many people who walked through the front door of Trash American Style and then back out the front door of Trash American Style without buying this Golden Earring record. Thank you. I love it. A toast to the people who did not buy Golden Earring live, either in 1977 or in 1997 or right here, right now, in 2021. My remarks about how Golden Earring Live is a good, honest live album, of course, brings me back to Kiss Alive. Kiss Alive is a great record, no doubt about it. But as far as it being a live document, it's fake. Oh, it is fake to the max. And that's no big industry secret, really. The members of Kiss themselves, the producer, Eddie Kramer, everybody's talked about the massive amounts of sweetening and fixing and overdubbing that went into this album, and Alive 2, and Alive 3, and Alive 4, and Alive 5. I don't know what they're up to now, probably 27 or 28, you know. I mean, these are as much studio concoctions as they are live concoctions. They would take the basic live recording and just start overdubbing and replacing. Whatever, it's a great album, what can I say? But the one thing that always really annoyed me about Kiss Alive, and especially Kiss Alive 2, not sure about the other ones because I never really listened to any of them, but the first two Kiss Alive records that really bug me to death, is the fact that the audience track, the sound of the audience cheering and yelling and screaming, is mixed very high up so that it's constantly running in the background. And Eddie Kramer and the members of Kiss have talked about that a lot. They said they actually made this elaborate, giant, literally tape loop that they had to like spool around the room and play constantly. This one loop of audience cheering noises, which plays throughout the entire duration of the album and is mixed just loud enough so that you hear it at all times. Now, the Kiss production team said that they did that because they wanted to recreate the feeling of what it was like to be in a Kiss concert. Bullshit! I'm calling you right now, that's bullshit. Anybody who's ever been to a concert, whether it's Kiss, a Kiss tribute band, Malcolm Tent solo acoustic, the Ramones, whatever. When you're when you're in the audience at a live concert, you don't hear people going constantly nonstop through the entire duration of the concert. You don't. Maybe for the Beatles in 1964, yes. Not for Kiss in 1975, or anybody in 1975, or anybody to this day. No audience sounds like that. Constant, non-stop screaming and cheering for 80-something minutes. It ain't so, kids. It just isn't so. So that begs the question, well, why? Why would they do that? Why would they go to the trouble to make this elaborate 100-foot long loop of audio tape and like string it around a room? You know, you got to read the story of how this was concocted. I can't make this stuff up. They went to great lengths to create this audience track that plays constantly during the album. Why would they do that? I'm going to tell you why they did it. I know the answer. I know the answer. Once I hydrate, I'm going to tell you the answer. I know the answer not only from a lifetime of going to concerts and playing concerts, but of also collecting all the live recordings there are of my favorite bands. You know, after you've heard just even a couple of, you know, like audience recorded bootleg concerts or soundboard recordings or FM recordings, or being at a couple of concerts, you know that audiences just don't do that. Short of it being, like I said, the Beatles in 1964 or Menudo in 1984. For a regular rock and roll concert, audiences do not sound like that. The real giveaway came, and you can look this one up. It's on YouTube. I found it. Look up Kiss, Cleveland, 1975. That originally was released as a bootleg CD sometime in the 1990s. Terrible cover art. It's got the Eric Carr lineup of the band on a classic Kiss recording. But Cleveland 1975 sounded interesting, so I picked up a copy. What it is really interesting. It's a rough mix of one of the tape recordings that was used to create Kiss Alive. I don't know if it really is Cleveland 75, but it's definitely the actual versions of some of the songs that appear on Kiss Alive, including the version of Rock and Roll All Night. What's interesting is that it's a different mix. It sounds like a real organic live concert without the constant shriek of the fake audience track in it. So it's a whole different listening experience. It's like the reality of being at a live Kiss show. It's what it really sounds like, and it sounds great. So it might beg the question of, well, why didn't they just use that? If it sounds that good and it's that cool and that authentic, why didn't they just use that? Well, I don't want to be a spoiler, but in telling the story, I have to sort of give this away. When I first listened to that recording, Kiss Cleveland 75, I was digging it. I loved it. Played it a lot. after a few listens, I realized that there was this like really strange echo on the vocal tracks. Like all of the vocals had this echo on them. But it sounded really weird because it wasn't an echo of what was actually sung. It was just wrong. It was a miss. You know, and if you know what I mean, you know, when you hear the echo of something, it's just a repetition of that sound over and over and over again until it fades out. The echoes on this recording of Kiss from Cleveland 75 on the vocals didn't match up. What you heard echoing in the background was not what you heard Gene or Paul or Peter actually saying. It was really weird. And with very, very careful listening, I was able to figure out what it was. It was the vocal sweetening. They went ahead and they overdubbed most, if not all, of the vocals for the actual album release. But when they recorded the basic live tracks, the live vocals bled into all of the audience or the instrument mics. You know, because you have to have vocal monitors on the stage, and they're sure they're loud as hell. So all of the instrument mics picked up the original vocal performances. You dig? So you're in the studio, you're mixing the drums, but oh my God, you can hear a very clear, faint trace of the original vocal performance in there, and you can't get rid of it because all the mics picked them up, and they are there permanently in the drum tracks, and also permanently there in the guitar tracks, and permanently there in whatever ambient room recordings they made, because that's part of a live recording. You get the room sound too. So of course the original vocals are there in the room sound. So what they did, by my estimation, by comparing that original tape to what's actually on the album, they completely scrapped the ambient room sound. They totally took that out of the mix, and then they overdubbed the vocals, so everything was like clean and clear and perfectly in rhythm and in sync and in tune and just as dramatic as you want it to be. And then to compensate for the echo, the residual remnants of the original vocal track, they took this fake live track and they mixed it just loud enough for it to cover the original vocal recordings. And you can hear, if you listen to that Cleveland tape, you can hear it. If you listen closely enough, you can hear lots of bum notes on the vocal department. You can hear occasionally where they overdubbed guitar parts. Like maybe Ace flubbed a few bits. No problem, we'll fix it in the mix. Problem is, the original flubs are still there because of the ambient nature of the recording. So it's actually, I think, really ingenious that they fixed that by masking it with audience noise. The problem is, the only way to make it actually work is to keep that audience noise going the whole time with the famous 5,000-foot tape loop that they had to string around the building 4 times to make it work. It makes sense when you look at it from a technical standpoint. And I'm going to guess that the performances on Kiss Alive 2 were even sloppier because the audience track on Kiss Alive 2 is mixed way up to where you can't tune it out, you can't ignore it, and it's as annoying as a fudgesicle melting on a sidewalk, and you can't do anything with it. My God, Kiss Alive 2 to me is practically unlistenable because of that audience track. It's so damn loud. And I guess the performances in the vocal department and maybe elsewhere were just so bad that they had to mask the flubs by putting that much audience noise on it. Man, I love / hate the music business. It's funny, but But it gives you lots of good stories and lots of cool things to talk about. That's why I do Tent Talks tunes. Hope you guys like it. Something else I've been listening to an awful lot lately, for whatever random reason, besides the fact that they are the greatest rock and roll band that America ever produced, is Cheap Trick. Been playing a lot of Cheap Trick lately. And actually the reason is there's a song that one of my bands does. Normally, if you look back here, you'd see a Bloody Apostles banner. I took that down because I've got this awesome, and I do mean awesome, They Hate Us poster drawn by the great John Truby. They Hate Us, my gutter punk band with P.P. Duvet and Dino Sex of the Murder Junkies. We're kind of in a dormant phase right now because of the current new reality. But once things get back to normal, we're going to be back in action. We're going to be cranking out the Putnam County gutter rock, and we're going to have these John Truby posters to flog for all you people. But my other band, the Bloody Apostles with P.P. Duvet, we have a song that constantly reminds me of a Cheap Trick tune. So I'm going back and listening to all this Cheap Trick. And of course, in my perverse fashion, I'm listening to a lot of the real deep stuff, because if half of my collection is made up of the weird collectible variants, the other half is made up of the albums that nobody wants, like Golden Earring Live, like The Doctor by Cheap Trick. Universally, just about universally regarded as the worst Cheap Trick album ever made. There are probably websites devoted to how bad people think this album is. I mean, it starts with the cover, and that cover is terrible. Just terrible. Gets no better on the back. Looks like a band with an acute identity crisis. And when you listen to it, the sounds in the groove do not help the situation because of the production. The production on this record is caca doo-doo. The production on this record is the worst brand of gimmicky 80s production. It's just gimmicky. It's clattering. It's cluttered with all kinds of unnecessary sound effects and bullshit that mask the fact, and here's where the savage punchline comes in, that pound for pound, in the songwriting department, this is one of the best Cheap Trick records in the catalog. There's scarcely a bad song. There's a couple of clunkers at the beginning of side 2. But man, all of side 1, from start to finish, kicks butt. The second half of side 2 rocks hard. The title track, The Doctor, if I were forced to make a top 20 Cheap Trick playlist, The Doctor would be in there. No problem. Cheap, gimmicky production and all. So this album suffers from god-awful 80s production, as does Lap of Luxury. This is another remnant from Trash American Style. I got this record as a cutout. There's the telltale cutout hole. I see you. And I tried to get $4.50 for it. That's my handwriting from 1995. This record sat in the bins from 1995 to 2007 until the day I brought it home, because nobody ever bought it. This record's not quite as good. In fact, this record's not nearly as good as The Doctor. It's got a couple of good songs on it. But again, the production, my God, the production will drive you up a tree. Busted is the same way. It's got 3 or 4 legitimately really great tunes. Walk Away. Walk Away is great. If there's any such thing as a good power ballad, Walk Away on this album is one of them. Even with Chrissie Hynde on it. I love Chrissie Hynde, but you don't need Chrissie Hynde to make a good Cheap Trick record. All right? That's what I'm talking about, gimmicky production. Get rid of Chrissie Hynde. Let her go off and do the Pretenders and do what she does best. Let Cheap Trick alone Leave them alone and let them do what they do best, which is be Cheap Trick. Thank you very much. Which is why I've always thought that these 3 albums would benefit tremendously from the Steve Albini treatment. And you might wonder, what are you talking about, Tent? You old jerk. What do you mean the Albini treatment? Well, I mentioned it before with the Kiss Cleveland 1975 live recording. Go on to, you guessed it, YouTube while you're over there subscribing to my channel. After you're done subscribing to my channel, look up Cheap Trick in color Albini sessions. Look it up and then play it. But before you click the play button, make sure you've got your stereo cranked up to a comfortably loud level, because that stuff was made to be played loud. What they did, Cheap Trick, was sometime in the, I think, early 90s, they went into the studio with Steve Albini and re-recorded the entire Cheap Trick in color album, because they were never satisfied with the production of it. They thought it was thin and watery and too radio friendly. So they just plugged in, turned everything up to regular concert volume, had Steve Albini mic it up and engineer it, and they rolled it. Man, woo. Night and day, kids. Night and day. They never released it. They never came out with it. And they never actually said why. But I think, sort of reading between the lines with the various interviews and stuff they've done about it, I'm guessing that when Cheap Trick finally gave up on the major labels in 1994 after Warner Brothers ruined their otherwise great album Woke Up With a Monster, after they were done with Warner Brothers finally and they went indie and started releasing albums on independent labels and on their own label, I believe, I'm going to guess, that they re-recorded their own version of In Color to release on their label. I'm pretty sure, I'll bet you money that's what they were going to do with it. And I'll also bet you money that once Epic, the old label, found out about that, they said, no, 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 no. You're not going to compete with the In Color that we've had in print since 1977. No. I'll bet you that CBS, Sony, Epic pulled the plug on Cheap Trick's own version of In Color. But, as happens sometimes, it leaked out, and now you can hear it anytime you want. CBS, Sony, you know my opinion of you. Sometimes the internet can act as the great equalizer, and we can listen to Cheap Trick In Color, recorded by Steve Albini, anytime we want. Once you're done subscribing to my channel, just saying. So, if that's the case, well, gosh darn it, why doesn't Cheap Trick take these albums, which really have such horrible production? You know, the original production of Cheap Trick In Color might be kind of thin and weak, but it's not bad. The production on these albums is bad. It's lousy. Oh, it hasn't aged well at all. All these synthesizers and drum machines and vocoders and just garbage that detracts from the genius of Cheap Trick. I want someone to get a petition going. Cheap Trick, if you ever see this or hear this, take advantage of this new reality when you're not allowed to go and play live. Go to the studio, plug in, relearn these albums, get Steve Albini in there and re-record them so we can actually hear, especially, man, I'm getting lost, especially with this one. Please record these songs the way they were meant to be heard, live and loud. I'm begging you. I'm begging you. Me, Malcolm Tent from Danbury, Connecticut. I'm begging you. I bought Cheap Trick at Budokan when it first came out, and I've been a mark for Cheap Trick ever since. I have bought concert tickets for Cheap Trick since, well, 1994. I never really had a chance to see you guys prior to that, but since 1994, I've come to see you play live any chance I possibly could. So this is a personal appeal from a raving fanboy to Cheap Trick. Re-record this album. And while you're at it, do this one and do this one. Let the people hear these songs the way they were meant to be heard. And you know what? If no one else does it, I think I'm going to take my rudimentary video editing skills and cut out that little bit that I just did with my weeping and wailing and moaning and gnashing of teeth and send it to Cheap Trick. And hope that they actually watch it and listen to the appeal of an educated consumer. I think I just might do that. If one of you guys doesn't beat me to it, I think I'm going to do it. Maybe if somebody out there watching now has good video editing skills, I'm just learning. If anybody out there has good video editing skills and can put together something based around that little appeal I just made that we could send to Cheap Trick, let's do it. If you want me to recut it from scratch and you can edit it, let's do it. Let's send it to Cheap Trick and make it happen. There. That's my challenge to all of you today on Tent Talks Tunes. I was going to talk about Celtic Frost Cold Lake. And I guess I am. Another heretical statement. This album's kind of like The Doctor. The songwriting on this record is really good. It really is. And just for a little bit of backstory, for those of you who don't know, Celtic Frost, hands down, universally acclaimed as not only the worst Celtic Frost album ever made, but perhaps one of the worst 80s metal bands by anybody ever made. And coming from the almighty Celtic Frost, that's a bitter, bitter statement to make. I remember when this album came out, there was some warning beforehand. Tom Warrior of Celtic Frost had done a couple of interviews, and he said, well, you know, our next album is going to have some elements of Motley Crue in it, and it might be a little more glamorous, but don't worry, there will still be some death grunts in it. Kind of made me roll my eyes a little bit. The album comes out, and we see the front cover. All right, that's cool. Celtic Frost, that ain't bad. Cold Lake, typical cryptic Celtic Frost album title. What's it look like? Oh my God. Celtic Frost. If you don't know about Celtic Frost, once again, go onto the internets and look them up and see why this was such a shock horror. To look at the back of a Celtic Frost record and see that. Never mind! Look at that. Do you see that? Look at that. What the fuck is that? God damn. Kurt Victor Bryant with the Unbuttoned Fly. I've actually met the guy. He's a nice guy. He's a cool dude. Excellent musician. Cool dude. You know, I should have just gone ahead and asked him, what the hell is up with that? I mean, if Celtic Frost thought they were going to cross over or reach a new audience, I think even in the somewhat dumbed down days of 80s hair metal, even that was a little bit much. If anybody got past that and actually bought the record and opened it up and they wanted to hear Celtic Frost, sorely disappointed. This record, in a nutshell, is too bizarre for your average hair metal fan and too effete, to say the least, to any Celtic Frost fan. It was the worst of all possible worlds. The hair metal people didn't want a record that looked like that. They were already prejudiced against Celtic Frost and Celtic Frost death metal fans. This is the band, or at least that's the guy, who invented death metal, pretty much. Celtic Frost fans did not want to hear music made by a bunch of guys who look like that. Lose, lose. The problem is, kind of like the Doctor, there are actually some really, really good songs on this album. The songwriting did not suffer in the slightest bit. The tunes are great. But the mix, oh man, the mix, it's just horrible. The drums are louder than the guitars. The drums are louder than the vocals, and the vocals are louder than the guitars. The guitars are like way down in the mix. So all you hear are like stereotypical 80s hair metal shotgun drums for 33 minutes. Boom, da, boom, da, boom, da, at varying tempos, with guitars somewhere in the deep, dark background, and Tom Warrior kind of doing his best to sound kind of glammy. Man, excuse me again. As it is, it just doesn't work. But with a remix or a live in the studio Steve Albini treatment, I think that the greatness of these songs could be revealed. I think if they just remixed it, because there's not much confetti on here sonically, it's just that, God, everything's just so out of balance and has so much sheen on it. If they could just get a good engineer and sit down with the tapes and remix it, for God's sake, so it sounds like a Celtic Frost album, that would do. That would do. And then keep the front cover, but by the name of whatever deity you worship, get rid of that, please. Or at least find an alternate take where Kurt Victor Bryant has buttoned his fly and maybe put on a t-shirt or something. Kurt, I love you, but oh man, please, please. As James Brown would say, please, please, please. But you got to go. And now I got to go. I think I've yammered on for almost an hour. It's pretty cool. We've covered everything from Tiny Tim to Celtic Frost in less than an hour here on Tint Talks Tunes. And as always, it's been an awful lot of fun. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and letting me do this. One last plug to keep an eye open for the Malcolm Tent Power Duo featuring Mad Brother Ward. It's not officially out yet, but any of you Antiseen fans out there who want one of these, contact me directly. I'll be happy to hook you up. And I'll be listing it soon enough on social media and on Discogs and eBay. So, again, thanks for everything. I got plenty more stuff to talk about in the near and far future. So I invite you guys to tune in again. Stay sane. Be well. And I do hope to be back in about 167 hours' time. So until we meet again, this is Malcolm Tent saying so long from the Nutmeg State.